Now, the desire to go green is turning into a competition. Just 3 years ago, when Boris Johnson was our Prime Minister, when interestingly, the Tories, today, 3 years ago, the Tories were at 54% in the polls, the highest government in office had ever been, Boris said this.
UK government has decided to become the world leader in low-cost clean power generation, cheaper than coal, cheaper than gas. And we believe that in 10 years' time, offshore wind will be powering every home in the country, with our target rising from 30 gigawatts to 40 gigawatts. You heard me right. Your kettle, your washing machine, your cooker, your heating, your plug-in electric vehicle, the whole lot of them, will get their juice cleanly and without guilt from the breezes that blow around these islands.
So there you are. That was Boris Johnson laying it all out. We were to be the Saudi Arabia of wind. Energy would be plentiful and cheap. They always tell us it's going to be cheap. Well, not to be outdone, Ed Miliband, yes, he's back. He really is back in the front line of politics. Ed Miliband gave a big speech today. Here's just a little taste of what he had to say.
We can carry on as we are with faltering climate leadership, losing the global race for green jobs, standing by while other countries get ahead. We can be sore losers in the face of the Inflation Reduction Act and watch Britain forfeit the greatest chance of prosperity for generations, betraying the repeated promise made by Conservative Prime Ministers of economic transformation, or we can do something different. Get in the race and be in it to win it. Consistent and clear climate leadership, a green industrial policy to create 1 million jobs and cut bills, a British version of the Inflation Reduction Act to make it happen, delivering the economic change the British people crave.
So what does all that mean? Well, what it means, of course, is there'll be an end to the ban on onshore wind farm development. There'll be a complete stop to all new oil and gas exploration. And the interesting point here is he wants us to go along the Joe Biden line of the Inflation Reduction Act. This is a massive piece, possibly one of the most expensive pieces of legislation ever passed in Congress in America. And what it means is vast subsidies for green energy. Well, you know, you might pay a cheap amount for your electricity, but you're going to pay for it on tax or pay for it somehow. I do not believe this will give us cheap energy. Maybe I'm wrong. But there is a real debate to be had here, because there's no debate, no proper debate happening in Parliament, I don't think, because both parties are attempting to out-green each other. Well, joining me down the line is Professor Wade Allison, Emeritus Professor of Physics at the University of Oxford. Wade, thank you for joining me this evening on GB News.
Thank you. Good evening.
Tell me, are you excited by the idea that a Labour government and their favourites to come in, that may change, of course, that a Labour government will go along the Joe Biden line with his Inflation Reduction Act, and there is going to be a massive uptick in renewable energy, whilst at the same time we stop all new exploration for fossil fuels? Is that something economically and in terms of energy security that you believe can work?
No. Just like that.
No? Do elaborate.
I mean, it's not a debate. It's about the science of energy, which I'm sure that Boris Johnson doesn't understand, although his Churchillian flourishes in that piece that you showed, I'm sure he enjoyed that. But energy, the energy of wind, and indeed the energy of solar, is very weak compared with the energy of fossil fuels. And that's why, at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, people decided, very quickly, to give up wind and solar and so on, because the ships didn't come in and the water mills stopped flowing and so on. That is not the way that could not support the world's population as it was then very well, and it certainly wouldn't support the population today. So now, as we get to the end of the Industrial Revolution, and we think perhaps we shouldn't be having quite so much fossil fuel energy, as we ramp down fossil fuel energy and we ramp up nuclear, which is the only other game in town, we should not look backwards to what didn't work before and won't work now.
All right, Professor Allison, thank you for that point of view. I'm joined by Tom Burke, CBE, a regular on this show. The argument the professor's putting is that actually these are not very efficient forms of energy. The argument I'm putting is if we do anything like the Joe Biden Act, this is yet more massive taxpayer subsidy for renewables.
Well, first of all, you can go green smart ways and stupid ways, and frankly, going nuclear is one of the stupider ways to go green. There are much smarter ways to do it, and if you do it in smarter ways, then we can argue about whether an investment is a subsidy or an investment. It seems to me that exactly what Biden is doing and understands is if you don't invest in driving forward, argue how much should be private, how much should be public, but if you don't invest, then you won't get anywhere. What's clearly happening now is the world's on a trajectory to getting rid of carbon from its energy system.
You know what, Tom? I just think I think that's wrong. We can think about ourselves here in the West. I put this to you, that in 2023, we're going to burn 8 billion tonnes of coal. It's more coal going to be burnt this year than has ever been burnt in human history. And we know what the Indonesians are doing, 250 coal-fired power stations, China, India. We know all these things. But the point I want to make about we have subsidised wind energy. It's been paid for by the poor, hasn't it?
Well, the reason we have computers right now is because the American government subsidised, I think, through a thing called DARPA, for defence reasons, the whole development of that technology. It took you around the bottom end of the learning cycle, and then it took off, which is why we now have phones, by the way, that even 20 years ago we didn't have. That was all a product of the fact that you invest, and when you invest at the beginning, it's expensive, and private sector doesn't do that investment. Government always had investment. That's now why everywhere in the world, actually everywhere in the world, it is now cheaper to install renewables to provide your electricity than it is to install any kind of fossil fuel plant. That's cheaper.
It's cheaper with subsidy.
No.
Let's be honest about it. But let's just move on if we can. We'll agree to disagree on that. But let's move on if we can to energy security. Security of energy supply,
Absolutely.
Which is utterly crucial. We had a power cut the other day. You can't function in the modern world without electricity. We can't do this just with renewables, can we?
Well, first of all, you're absolutely right about the priority of energy security. The best, smartest, cleverest way to drive bills down is to stop our houses leaking, our buildings, not just our houses, leaking as much energy as they do.
That would help in the short term, but it doesn't solve the entire problem.
Well, no, of course not. I didn't say it was going to solve the entire problem. I just said if you don't do that, it's like running water into a bathtub you've forgotten to put the plug into. So it's kind of dumb. So let's put the plug in first. The next thing we should do, exactly right, it's got to be affordable, it's got to be secure. That exactly is what you're going to get from wind and renewables, provided, one, you do the right kind of market, our current market, which prices everything at the price of gas, which means we're giving... exactly.
Don't worry, I know the racket that's been going on.
And the second piece of that is you've got to invest in storage.
But you and I both know, at the moment, I've been hearing about storage since the year 2000, since I started asking questions about this. At the moment, storage is wildly expensive. It may get better as the years go on, but for now, do you not accept we need fossil fuels?
It's worse than you're saying. For now, we don't actually have enough of it. And the costs of batteries, which are part but not all of the solution, have gone through the floor over exactly the same way as renewables did, actually for the same reason, because governments started the ball rolling and then markets have picked it up and rolled it forward. You know what? The problem that irritates you as much as it irritates me is we're paying people to switch off their wind at night because we can't use the energy. Well, if you use those switched off reactors, instead you use that to make hydrogen, which you stored long term, you'd solve the hydrogen.
But hydrogen isn't dense enough to be used in any large usage at this moment in time.
Hydrogen, you burn it in an existing gas-fired power station.
You
should not put it into houses. I agree with that.
There we are. Houses, cars, it will not work. It may have uses. In some ways, I'm not sure Tom Burke and I are as far apart, perhaps, as people think. But it's a big debate. It's a very important debate.
Right, absolutely.
And, you know, we've had to reopen 2 coal-fired power stations this winter.
Yeah.
That
and
shows you.
That's because there's no consistency in government. You know what investors require above all from government? Consistency.
A bit of certitude. No, you're absolutely right.